The night over Alaska felt endless. The sky was a blanket of black snow clouds that swallowed every sound. Atlas 7 cut through it, engines growling low, metal creaking as the storm pressed against its wings. Inside the cockpit, Captain Dorian Wells rubbed his eyes. "Altitude steady," he muttered, staring at the instruments glowing green in the dark. First Officer Lighton gave a quiet nod. "Looks like we're flying straight into it. Storms moving faster than they said." "They always do," Wells said. Neither of them knew what they were carrying. They never did. Every flight under Sentry Division came sealed, unmarked, and buried under clearance they'd never have. No manifests, no questions. Their job was simple: fly, land, forget. But tonight felt different. In the back, the cargo bay stretched like a cold metal tomb. 6 armed guards sat shoulder to shoulder under flickering lights, their black armor glinting as the plane shuddered through turbulence. Their leader, Sergeant Pike, kept his eyes on the row of massive steel containers bolted to the floor. Each container was surrounded by a second layer of reinforced bars, like cages within cages. The temperature was below freezing. Frost covered every latch and pipe. The guards had been told the creatures inside were sedated, kept asleep in cryochambers, locked behind reinforced steel. But none of them had ever seen what they were guarding. Only the markings on the containers gave any hint of what waited inside. Specimen 12, DM. Specimen 7, GG. Specimen 3, JBF. Specimen 1, MT. They didn't know those stood for Dogman, Gogwe, J, Bafofi, and Mothman. The youngest guard, Ramirez, felt a faint vibration under his boots. "Hey," he said quietly, "you feel that?" Pike didn't look up. "It's turbulence." "Doesn't feel like it." Another tremor rolled through the deck. Then a metallic clank, like something shifting inside one of the containers. Lightning flashed outside, washing the bay in white light. A low rumble filled the air. In the cockpit, Lighton frowned. "We're getting pressure warnings from the rear hold." Wells tapped the screen, annoyed. "It's probably the storm. Reset it." Lighton did, but the warning stayed. Down below, one of the cages rattled. Frost cracked and fell from the bars. Ramirez's hand tightened on his rifle. "Sergeant." "Stay seated," Pike said, standing now. His breath fogged in front of him. "I'll check it." He walked toward the nearest container. The glass window on the front was fogged white, but there was movement behind it, slow, heavy. Then came a sound none of them would forget, a long, muffled growl that didn't sound human or animal, something in between. Pike's radio hissed. "Captain, we have movement in cargo." Wells answered through static. "Everything's locked down, right?" "Supposed to be." Plane jolted hard, throwing everyone sideways. An alarm blared. Lighton shouted, "Engine 2 just dropped power." The cockpit lights dimmed and came back weakly. The storm outside swallowed the sky. Pike spun as one of the containers hissed. The locks along its sides began to twitch. Inside, something big shifted against the glass. Cracks spiderwebbed across it. "Captain, I've got a breach," Pike shouted. Before Wells could respond, the entire plane shook with a deep boom. Sparks rained from the ceiling. The first creature to break free was the Dogman. The glass exploded outward, shards slicing through the air. A cloud of freezing mist poured out. The thing's hand slammed against the inner cage, claws screeching against the bars. The guards opened fire. The sound of gunfire filled the bay, but it was too late. The bars bent. One snapped. The Dogman slipped through like smoke. Ramirez screamed as it hit him, dragging him off his feet. The others backed up toward the door, shooting, yelling, slipping on the frost-slick floor. Then the next container cracked. The Gugwi slammed its shoulder into the metal and split it open. The plane rocked from the impact. "Captain, we've lost containment," Pike roared into his radio. "Lock the hold," Wells shouted, flipping the emergency seal switch. But the panel light blinked red. Manual override engaged. Someone or something had already disabled the locks. The cabin camera feed flickered. For one frame, Wells saw it, a huge dark shape with wings spread wide, eyes glowing red. Then the feed died completely. "Layton, brace for impact." In the bay, chaos took over. The Gugwi and DOGMAN tore through the guards. A massive spider leg punched through a vent in the ceiling, dragging a screaming man up into the dark. The lights flickered and went black, and then the Mothman stepped through the smoke. Its wings unfolded, black and endless, sucking in the light. Every alarm in the cockpit went off at once. "Mayday, Mayday. Atlas 7 going down," Wells yelled into the mic, voice shaking. "Coordinates." Static cut him off. The right wing hit first, clipping a mountain ridge. Plane spun through trees, shearing branches and tearing itself apart. Fire exploded along the fuselage. When everything stopped moving, there was only the wind. Snow drifted through the torn metal, glowing orange from the fires. Wells coughed and unbuckled himself. His nose was bleeding. "Layton," he whispered. No answer. He stumbled through the wreckage, smoke stinging his eyes. The rear of the plane was gone, ripped open like a tin can. Somewhere out there in the burning snow, something howled. Another voice answered, deeper, angrier. Wells froze, listening. Between the flames, something large moved on all fours, slipping between the trees. He limped out into the cold, clutching his side. His breath came out white against the night. Behind him, the fire hissed in the snow. Ahead of him, in the black distance, a pair of glowing red eyes blinked once, then vanished. The world came back in flashes. Cold wind on his face, a faint hiss from the broken fuselage, the smell of smoke and burning metal. Wells opened his eyes to a gray sky, snow drifting through the shattered cockpit windows. His hands shook, his breath came in bursts. The wreck was split in two. One half lay half buried in snow, the other scattered down the slope. Fire hissed somewhere below, dying slow in the cold. Wells pulled himself out of the pilot's chair and dropped into the snow. His knees buckled. "Layton," he called. "You alive?" No answer. Only the wind. He pushed through twisted metal and frost until he found Layton pinned under a section of the dashboard. His eyes were open but empty. The impact had taken him fast. Wells looked away, jaw tight. Behind him, the wind carried faint movement. Metal creaking. Boots crunching snow. He turned and saw flashlights cutting through the smoke. "Captain!" a voice shouted. "Over here." Sergeant Pike stumbled into view, face bleeding, one arm hanging useless. Two guards followed, limping, wide-eyed, coated in frost. "Who else made it?" Wells asked. Pike shook his head. "No one from the rear hold. The whole section tore off before we hit. Everything inside, it's gone." "Gone as in destroyed?" Pike didn't answer. He looked toward the trees. "I saw movement out there, big. Too fast to be one of ours." The group went quiet. Snow drifted heavier now, muffling everything except the wind. "Radio?" Wells asked. "Cracked," Pike said. "Antenna's gone. Only thing that might work is the beacon in the cockpit, if it's still transmitting." They climbed back inside to check. The air smelled like burned wiring and cold fuel. Wells yanked open a panel. The beacon light blinked weakly. "Still alive." "Signal's out," he said. Someone will come looking once the storm clears. If they even know we're missing, Pike said. Flights like this don't exist on paper. Wells glanced at him. Then we make sure they can't ignore us. A sound rolled through the forest. A deep, stretched out howl that froze them where they stood. It was too long, too low, too heavy to belong to anything normal. Pike's hand went to his rifle. That wasn't human. Dog, one of the guards whispered. Too deep, Pike said quietly. Too big. Branches cracked in the distance. Something heavy moved between the trees. Get inside, Wells said. They crouched behind a torn section of wall, rifles ready. The wind howled through the gaps, carrying the stink of wet fur and blood. For a second, Wells thought it was a bear. Then he saw its shape, tall, wrong, half-bent, like it couldn't decide if it should walk upright or on all fours. Fire! Pike shouted. Gunfire split the silence. Muzzle flashes lit the snow, echoing through the forest. The thing darted between trees and vanished into the fog. When the gunfire stopped, the forest fell quiet again. Pike lowered his rifle. That was one of them. One of what? Wells asked, though he already knew. Pike looked back at the wreck. You saw those markings. D, M, G, G, J, B, F, M, T. Those weren't random. Wells frowned. You know what they mean? I've seen similar codes before. Sentry doesn't just move cargo. They contain it. Wells' stomach dropped. You're saying those things were alive? They were. Cryo chambers and reinforced cages. The youngest guard, Colin, swallowed hard. So what now? We wait for help? Pike looked toward the dark tree line. If those things survived, we don't wait. We move. We find high ground and daylight. Wells nodded. Grab supplies. We'll go once it's light enough to see. They scavenged what they could. Rifles, rations, a flare gun, and a small field radio that was half-bent but maybe fixable. Pike took point. Wells followed behind with the beacon in his pack. As the wind picked up, Wells caught sight of the rear half of the plane far down the slope. The snow around it was churned up, dark in places where blood soaked through. One of the cages lay open, its bars bent outward. He stared at it. Pike, look at that. Pike walked up beside him. The metal was shredded like paper. Nothing could have lived through that, Colin said. Pike glanced at the snow. Large prints ran away from the wreck. Tell that to whatever made those. A loud crack echoed from the trees. Colin swung his rifle toward the sound. Hold your fire, Pike whispered. Something moved in the distance, slow and deliberate. The snow rippled as it passed through the fog. Then came the clicking sound, faint, quick, rhythmic. It wasn't footsteps. It was the sound of something climbing, claws scraping bark. The spiders, Pike said under his breath. J. Bafofi. They backed up toward the wreck. Pike aimed his rifle into the fog. The clicking stopped. A moment later, something dropped from the trees. Massive, black, legs long enough to blot out the light. It hit the snow in silence and started crawling toward them. Go! Pike yelled. The men ran for the wreck, slipping, stumbling through snow and debris. Creature followed, its legs stabbing into the ground like spears. Wells fired behind him, rounds sparking off frozen bark. The spider flinched and pulled back into the trees, hissing. They made it into the broken fuselage and shoved a door panel across the opening. The wind screamed outside. Pike crouched beside Wells, panting. They're not just loose, Captain. They're hunting. Wells stared at the forest through the gaps in the wreckage. In the distance, another howl rose. Not the spider this time, something deeper, angrier. "That's not the same one," Collins whispered. "That's something else." Wells gripped his rifle tighter. "Yeah," he said quietly. "And it's getting closer." The storm hadn't stopped. Snow came sideways now, driven by a wind that howled through the valley like a voice. The wrecked plane groaned under the weight of it. Inside, Wells sat against a wall of twisted metal, his rifle across his knees. His fingers were stiff, cracked, and numb. Pike was awake, checking magazines with trembling hands. Collins sat near the fire they'd built from broken seats, staring into the smoke. No one spoke. Every few minutes, a noise outside would freeze them. A snap of wood, the crunch of snow, the distant hiss of something breathing that wasn't the wind. "How long since the beacon went up?" Wells asked. 3 hours, Pike said. "If it's working, someone's seen it. And if it's not," Pike looked at him, "then we die out here." The wind shifted, bringing with it the faint sound of something big moving through the trees. Collins raised his rifle. "That's close." "Keep your eyes open," Pike said. The snow outside glowed faintly orange from the fire. Then it dimmed, like something passed in front of the light. A shadow moved across the fuselage wall. Pike mouthed, "Don't move." The shadow stopped. Then claws raked against the metal. The sound was slow, testing. Collins' breathing quickened. Wells could see his hands shaking. Pike held up a hand. "Wait." The creature hit the wall with a loud crack. Metal bent inward. Collins panicked and fired. Bullets punched through the fuselage and into the storm. The shadow roared, not pain but rage, and the wall buckled. A dogman's arm tore through, claws slicing air. "Fall back," Pike shouted. They ran deeper into the wreck, the beast ripping at the opening. It forced its head through, teeth snapping, eyes glowing like embers. Wells fired point blank into its face. The creature reeled, snarling, blood spraying across the snow. More howls answered in the distance. "Pack!" Pike yelled. "There's more of them." The 3 men climbed through a split in the hull and into the open storm. The cold hit like knives. Trees swayed and cracked under the wind. "Beacons up the ridge." Wells shouted over the roar. "We get there. We light flares. Maybe someone sees us." They started running uphill through waist-deep snow. Behind them, shadows darted between the trees. The dogmen were hunting in silence now. Halfway up the ridge, a massive shape stepped from the fog. Not a dogman. Taller, heavier, a gugwe. Its chest was broad, covered in dark fur. Its mouth hung open, teeth slick with blood. It charged. Pike unloaded his rifle. The beast plowed through the rounds like they were nothing. It grabbed him mid-stride and hurled him into a tree. The sound of impact echoed down the slope. "Pike!" Wells screamed, but it was no use. The gugwe turned its head toward him. For a moment, its red eyes met his. Then, something else moved above it, a blur in the storm. A dogman slammed into the gugwe's side, knocking it off balance. The 2 beasts tore into each other, snarling, clawing, biting chunks of flesh. "Go!" Pike's voice came weak from the snow. "Run!" Wells grabbed Collins and pulled him uphill. The fight below vanished into the blizzard. When they reached the ridge, the wind cleared for a heartbeat. The sky glowed pale gray. Wells could see the beacon ahead, half buried, still blinking faintly. They stumbled toward it, but the snow around them began to move. It wasn't wind. It was legs, long, black, glistening with frost. The J-Ba-Fofi had returned. "Light the flare," Wells shouted. Collins fumbled with his belt, hands shaking. One of the spider's legs shot forward, skewering him through the chest. He gasped, blood hitting the snow. Wells screamed and fired, emptying his rifle into the thing's face. Black ichor splattered the ground. Collins fell limp. The spider reared back and retreated into the trees, hissing. Wells dropped to his knees, heart pounding. He grabbed the flare gun, pointed it at the sky, and fired. The red light streaked upward, cutting through the storm. The glow flickered across the clouds, and that's when he saw it. High above, wings stretched wide, gliding silently through the snow. The Mothman. It circled once, slow and deliberate. Then it dove, the air splitting around it. Wells turned and ran, slipping through drifts, the beacon flashing behind him. The wind screamed. The world seemed to fold around the creature's descent. He dove behind a fallen log as the Mothman hit the ground with a sound like thunder. Snow exploded into the air. Wells fired his last rounds. The bullets sparked off its wings. The creature tilted its head, almost curious, and stepped closer. Its eyes burned through the storm, locking on him. The air grew heavy. Wells felt his chest tighten. The wind stopped. Even the snow seemed to hang in place. Then the sky flashed. A flare burst overhead, followed by the whine of rotors. A helicopter broke through the storm, its spotlight sweeping across the ridge. Wells waved his arms and shouted until his voice cracked. The chopper began to descend. Could see the silhouettes of two pilots inside, helmets glinting in the light. Wells dropped to his knees, laughing from sheer relief. But above him, the Mothman moved again. It rose from the snow and disappeared into the clouds. The helicopter hovered lower, landing gear inches from the ground. Wells reached up toward it, shouting over the wind. Then, something dark streaked out of the sky. The Mothman tore through the cockpit in a single motion, shattering glass and steel. The rotor screamed as it tilted sideways. The chopper spun, clipped the ridge, and slammed into the trees below. A burst of fire lit the valley, followed by silence. Wells fell back into the snow, the heat of the explosion washing over him. He stared down the slope where the wreck burned bright against the dark. The storm swallowed the light in seconds. He was alone again. The beacon still blinked behind him, weak and steady. He turned toward the forest. The howls had started again, closer this time, echoing from every side. Wells grabbed the rifle from the snow and loaded the last magazine from his pack. His breath fogged in front of him as he stared into the dark. "All right," he whispered. "Come on." The wind carried the scent of smoke and blood. Something moved between the trees, low and fast. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe to Descent into the Unknown for more horror content. If you have any real cryptid encounters, or you're a horror writer wanting to share your stories, please feel free to email me in the description anytime.